Investigators have still not found Kenande Bennett, nearly 20 years after she disappeared. Kenande's parents reported her missing back in 2002, saying someone had kidnapped her from the Kmart store in Whiteville. WECT's investigative reporter Ann McAdams has poured through the recently released FBI file into Kenande's case. Ann joins us now with our Crimes of the Cape Fear report. So what does that file tell you tonight, Ann?
John, investigators assigned to look into Kenande's disappearance quickly became suspicious that something was very wrong with her parents' story. What started out as a search for a missing child would ultimately turn into a murder investigation.
It was a story that panicked parents across our viewing area. A 4-year-old girl reportedly snatched from her mother at the Whiteville Kmart. Vartasha McCullough appeared desperate to find her child. But she and Kenande's father, Kevin Bennett, gave conflicting accounts about their final hours with Kenande, and their strange behavior in the wake of their daughter's disappearance also gave authorities reason for concern.
One of our investigators noticed that they had actually taken all of the toys and most of the child's clothing and had thrown it away.
To people who'd spent their careers searching for missing children, something was off.
You know, I pay attention when people talk in past tense, when we don't even know what's happened to this child yet. But you know, you refer to this child in past tense.
Please help us find this child.
About a week after she vanished, Conway police officially named Kenande's parents as suspects in the case. Her mother failed a lie detector test about her daughter's disappearance, and her father refused to take one. Friends and family also told authorities Kenande had been mistreated and that the little girl told them her mother had been hurting her.
I was actually seen by witnesses with marks and bruises that would be consistent with abuse on her body on Friday.
The day she went missing, investigators found Vartasha's apartment had been scrubbed down with bleach. Despite the extensive cleanup effort, detectives still found concerning amounts of Kenande's DNA and suspected she'd been harmed. When months passed and search crews could still find no sign of the missing 4-year-old, Vartasha McCullough and Kevin Bennett were arrested for homicide by child abuse. The trial happened in Horry County, South Carolina, where authorities believed Kenande died.
I am a good mother. She was right behind my leg. She was behind my leg.
It was the first time in South Carolina history prosecutors had taken a child homicide case to trial without a body. Despite the legal challenges, the state convinced a jury Vartasha McCullough was responsible for her daughter's death.
It is therefore the sentence and judgment of this court to be confined in the state penitentiary for a period of 20 years.
While nearly 2 decades have passed since her disappearance, those involved in Kenande's case still think about her.
It's really horrific. It's a really tragic thing to see a child that's been hurt like that.
I've always kept a place for Kenande in my heart, is because the small child vanished, and even during nowadays when a small child vanished, everybody in the world wants to help. People didn't really want to help. We had to bring our own searchers in. We had to bring our people from other states and other communities that were part of our organization to come in because the local people just weren't interested. I just feel like if we're her family, I just feel like the investigators, the prosecutors, the law enforcement that worked the case, and the volunteers who searched for her, I just feel like that's her family, and that, you know, it's just sad.
Vartasha McCullough has almost completed her 20-year prison sentence and is scheduled to be released in 2023. Prosecutors ended up dropping the charges against Kevin Bennett before trial because their case against him was not as strong. But John, they wholeheartedly believe he was involved in his daughter's death, and if they ever do find Kenande's body, the state could still pursue murder charges against him.
All right, WECT's Ann McAdams live tonight. Ann, thanks. The truth is what the family has asked for since it happened. For the first time in more than 6 years, we may now have the truth about what happened to Lennon Lacey, the high school football player from Bladen County, whose body was found hanging from a swing set in Bladenboro. WECT's investigative reporter Ann McAdams has reviewed the just-released FBI file. So, Ann, how extensive is this file you're talking about?
John, investigators just released the most essential parts of the file, and that alone was 823 pages. In it, the FBI explains how they reached the conclusion that Lennon Lacy died by suicide and was not the victim of a hate crime.
It's a story that captured the attention of our community and the world.
New developments this evening in the hanging death of a black high school student in North Carolina whose case was first ruled a suicide but is now being investigated by the Justice Department.
Lennon Lacy's death came on the heels of the deadly shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Some feared Lacy's death was not a suicide, but a race-related lynching.
Lennon! Lacy! Justice! Now!
Lacy's family members didn't recognize the belts that were used to make his noose or the shoes he was wearing, which by some accounts were 2 sizes too small. Shortly before his death, Lacy had also angered some in his community by dating a white woman nearly twice his age.
Ask yourself the question, would you be satisfied with all of these unanswered questions if it was your son?
I've been called by CNN, MSNBC, Katie Couric.
Why do you think that your brother didn't commit suicide?
He was just too happy for life.
The just-released FBI file shows that investigators reviewed surveillance video, subpoenaed 1,500 text messages and Facebook posts, and interviewed 49 people in their search for the truth. While some agreed Lacy seemed fine, one of his close friends told investigators that just days before his death, Lacy was suicidal. He says Lacy confided he had tried to hang himself, but the belts broke. Other friends told detectives he was angry and withdrawn. We knew that Lacy was mourning the death of a favorite great-uncle, whose funeral was the day before his own death. But a newly revealed detail could be even more telling. Lacy had just had his heart broken. Officials say Michelle Brimhall, the 31-year-old white woman who he had been seeing and developed strong feelings for, had broken up with Lacy the week before his death. Despite the warning signs of depression, detectives chased down every lead suggesting foul play. They worked with law enforcement officers across the state to vet concerns that Lacy may have been lynched. Those leads simply didn't pan out. The lengthy investigation, an emotional roller coaster for his grieving but stoic family.
God has prepared me for all things. With His grace and mercy, I've come this far, and He's not going to leave me now.
In the end, agents determined the shoes Lacy was wearing when he died were the same size as shoes he'd just been custom fitted for when getting sized for his ROTC uniform. And when detectives reviewed selfies Lacy had posted on Facebook, they found him wearing belts identical to the ones later used to fashion his noose. Other than ant bites that marred his body after his death, the medical examiner found no visible injuries to Lacy's body apart from ligature marks. While some wondered how he could have hung himself in the top of a swing set, an investigator's reenactment found he could have used a nearby platform or stood on a swing. While utterly tragic, officials ultimately reached the conclusion Lacy died by his own hands.
While presumably better than murder, the truth is still troubling. Last week, we spoke to Lennon's mother, Claudia, who was unaware the FBI file in her son's case had been released. John, after she had a chance to review it, Miss Lacy still declined to comment or even say whether she accepted the findings of the FBI, as she had previously indicated she would.
WECT's Ann McAdams tonight with an update on the investigation. Ann, thanks.
It was an undercover FBI operation from the early 1980s. The feds called it Operation Cold Core, pulling the lid off a far-reaching, organized crime scandal across southeastern North Carolina.
And as we continue our Crimes of the Cape Fear series of reports tonight, WECT investigative reporter Ann McAdams poured through recently released FBI files on the Cold Core case, and she's in the studio tonight. What did you find, Ann?
Fran and John, more than 50 people were ultimately arrested in the Cold Core and Operation Gateway stings, including high-profile government officials. Because the cases are 40 years old, many people here don't know much about them, so we read the file and tracked down the lead undercover agent on the Cold Core case to better understand what happened.
It was an investigation that led to the arrest of a judge, a sheriff, state lawmakers, and even the lieutenant governor of North Carolina. FBI agent Bob Durdak, who's now retired, spent a year and a half of his life undercover on the Colcord case, gathering evidence to make dozens of arrests.
From the minute we got there until the end, we knew there was some serious, problems there regarding respect for the law.
Durdak says the case was born after the FBI got wind public officials in Columbus County were taking bribes. As part of their cover, Durdak and another agent ran a high-stakes poker game out of Lake Waccamaw, posing as mobsters from Detroit. Before long, public officials were showing up to play. The sheer variety of criminal activity agents discovered that public officials were tied to is mind-boggling. Drug smuggling, auto theft, and insurance fraud were rampant. Law enforcement officers also offered their protection for a price.
The chief one day came up and he and I talked, and he said he would haul cocaine in his police car for me from where we picked it up to where it needed to go.
State Representative Ronald Taylor tried to hire the undercover agents to burn down warehouses which belonged to a fellow state lawmaker and business competitor.
We told him we were going to do it for him, and for so much money, and we were going to have some guys come into Detroit and case it and all that. But we could only do so much. We couldn't set it on fire ourselves. And finally, he just went and got somebody else to burn it.
Right in the thick of the corruption, Columbus County Commission Chair Ed Williamson.
Once we were paying him money, if we need something through the government, he'd pick up and make a phone call, and next minute somebody was there doing it for us.
Williamson also let them know that in Columbus County, elections could be bought. When Durdak and his partner said they wanted to open a nightclub but would need legislation passed to sell liquor there, Williamson introduced them to State Senator R.C. Soles. WECT still has the undercover video of their 1981 meeting.
I can do it lots without being on your payroll officially, you see what I'm talking about?
While Soles declined to take any cash payment for his help, other lawmakers did, and the vote passed. Soles and others faced criminal charges for their ties to the tainted legislation, which was ultimately invalidated because votes had been bought. In the end, 3 of the 4 charges against Soles were dismissed by a judge, and he was acquitted by a jury on the remaining charge of aiding Williamson in obtaining payoffs.
He had a lot of money, and he had good attorneys. I mean, when it comes to a trial and putting a politician on the stand, a lot of times the same charisma that they have that got him elected will help sway the jury in their behalf.
Lieutenant Governor James C. Green also acquitted on state charges for taking bribes. But the evidence against Representative Ron Taylor was damning enough that he pled guilty. Amazingly, some of the politicians convicted in that sting managed to maintain public support.
People that we convicted got reelected, to their spots, and they couldn't take the position because they were felons. But people we convicted stayed on the ballot and won.
When asked if people in and around Columbus County showed appreciation for the work they did rooting out corruption there, Durdak said for the most part, no. But he does remember being thanked by members of law enforcement who were on the right side of the law. Durdak believes they were able to make a difference, at least in the short run, holding people accountable for their corruption. John?
All right, and did he talk to you about why he thought the corruption was so rampant in the county?
John, he said it was greed. He said in a rural area like Columbus County, where opportunities for financial success are more limited, taking bribes and payoffs was an easy way for people to make some money.
All right, Ann McAdams, fascinating stuff, Ann, thanks.
It was a crime that rocked the Wilmington community. An FBI secretary found dead in her home, nude and apparently strangled.
WECT's investigative reporter Ann McAdams has an inside look at what happened as she continues with Crimes of the Cape Fear. Ann?
Fran and John, Melissa Mooney's death happened in 1999, but the FBI file into her murder was just released. The case remained unsolved for years, but her devastated co-workers at the FBI would not stop until she got justice.
She didn't show up and she didn't call, which is very unusual.
On August 6, 1999, the ever-punctual Melissa Mooney was late to work. It worried her coworkers at the Wilmington FBI office so much that Larry Bonney sent 2 agents out to check on her at her new home in Castle Hayne.
The door has been kicked open. The door frame was broken, big boot print on the floor. I said, go ahead in, treat it like a crime scene. 5 minutes later, they called back and they said, she's dead.
Agents found Mooney's nude and lifeless body lying face up on the bedroom floor. In no time, a massive investigation was underway. The New Hanover County Sheriff's Office took the lead, but had the full force of the FBI behind them.
She was part of the FBI family, and the FBI family weren't going to quit on this case until they figured out who did it and why they did it.
By nearly all accounts, Mooney was kind, quiet, reliable, and well-liked. But her personal life had been rocky.
She was having some bad experiences at home, and I saw some signs of that. She'd come in with a bruise, and I'd say, what happened? And I fell down, and I'd finally say, come in here and sit down. What the heck's going on?
Melissa divorced husband Roger Mooney, but had been in a heated fight over child support for their 4-year-old daughter just before her death. So when Melissa showed up dead, many people naturally suspected Roger. But he insisted he didn't do it, and after thoroughly investigating him, agents agreed.
So who did kill Melissa? After her divorce, she had other relationships. Agents tracked the men down, but they either had alibis or no real motive to kill her. After 2 years of painstaking work, the case had grown cold.
We just had to say, let's start over. You have to constantly test your assumptions with this job. You can't just always go off of your gut. You have to look at the evidence, sometimes from 10 different ways.
They brought in new detectives, offered an $80,000 reward to generate new leads, and went back to the beginning, canvassing the neighborhood for anyone who may have seen or heard anything the night Mooney died. This time, someone stood out. Tyrone Delgado, who lived down the street from Mooney, wasn't as cooperative with investigators as he had been in 1999. Back then, he'd told agents he hadn't noticed anything unusual the night Mooney died. But now, her ex-military neighbor didn't want to talk to investigators at all. Delgado's odd behavior prompted agents to start digging into his past.
Mr. Delgado had never been convicted of more than misdemeanors, but he had been a suspect and charged in some terrible cases, including a brutal sexual assault.
Delgado had been arrested for breaking into a woman's Louisiana home back in 1994. She was pregnant and at home with her 4 young children when she says Delgado sexually assaulted her. The pictures taken at the hospital after the attack are frightening.
When the FBI went and looked at that file, they thought they were looking at the ghost of Melissa Mooney.
Despite the horrific attack, the victim in Louisiana eventually dropped the charges after Delgado's mother, an elected official there, asked the district attorney for a plea deal. Delgado's mother agreed to pay the victim $2,000, and her son Tyrone agreed to leave town. When agents looked into other places Delgado had lived during his time with the military, they found more than a dozen other women who claimed he'd brutalized them. That disturbing past would eventually catch up with him. In 2003, Delgado's wife, Anna Cruz, said he tried to kill her.
They say the more you talk about it, the better it gets, but as his hand was over my nose and mouth, I would take short breaths, but at the same time, I'm trying to fight him off of me.
Cruz's injuries, strikingly similar to Mooney's. Delgado was arrested for attacking his wife, and authorities finally linked him to DNA evidence found on Mooney's mattress. He was arrested for Mooney's murder, and when the case went to trial, women from across the country flew to Wilmington to testify that Delgado had attacked them too.
She did nothing wrong. I still to this day don't understand why he did it. I've always wanted to ask him why, but I don't think I'm gonna get a true answer why.
Every now and then, you'll get someone who's just pure evil. I would put Tyrone Delgado on the Mount Rushmore of any cases I've prosecuted.
I'm gonna let my kids write me, all right?
In the end, it took the jury less than 4 hours to find Delgado guilty of first-degree murder. It was a case that could have remained unsolved if it were not for the dedicated work of prosecutors and Melissa's co-workers determined to find her killer.
The FBI family is real and exists. We take care of our own.
Tyrone Delgado is serving life in prison and continues to appeal his conviction. Reporting in the newsroom, Ann McAdams, WBCT News.